Hi, this is Adam Carroll, UN Program Director at Justice for All. This program is called UN This Week, and it's a program that we've been doing since early July, uh, primarily to focus on the uh, international community, what it's doing, how it's responding, not only to the current crisis of COVID-19, but to the various conflicts that are ongoing. And there are many. Today, we're going to be speaking about the Nagorno-Karabakh crisis. It's an ongoing conflict that's just erupted again. And we just had a show in one of our other programs called Justice for All Now, JFA Now, where host Hannah Zuberi had on with her a guest named Ismail Al-Akbarov from the Canadian community of Azerbaijanis or Azeris. And I think, though, that we're going to take probably a different approach, less finger pointing, perhaps. We've spoken about the conflicts in places like Bolivia and China, and tomorrow, this Thursday, it will be the Central African Republic. So we're trying to look at different situations and maybe taking a bit more of a diplomatic viewpoint. And so what is that? Is diplomacy just wishy-washiness? There are certainly huge concerns, and now it's a time of emotion and dismay as we see civilians being targeted once again. So if we could have a map up first, and then I'll introduce our guest today. The map of Azerbaijan will give you a sense that it adjoins Armenia. Oh, okay, great. And adjoins also, well, it's in a region which has had conflicts over the many years. So leaving that on the screen for a moment, just taking a moment to look at it. And now let's introduce our guest. This is Alex Raufoglu, whom I met a few years ago at a conference. He's an Azerbaijani-American journalist, researcher, and press freedom advocate who focuses on Eurasia, that whole area. Born in Baku, Mr. Raufoglu holds an MA in interactive journalism from American University in Washington, D.C., and a BA in journalism from Ege University in Izmir, Turkey. And we could say a lot more about his various media and journalistic activities, but just to cut it short, say that since 2008, Alex has lived in the US, where he has worked as a journalist for several media outlets and represents Azerbaijan's last independent news agency, Turan, in the United States. Okay, lots to speak about, but welcome to the show, Alex.
Adam, it's great to see you after all these years, albeit virtually.
Yes, it was nice. I still remember meeting you at that conference.
I have been. I've always followed your work on Burma and all the other regions. I appreciate your making time on the Nagorno-Karabakh issue as well. But I'm one of your fans.
Well, likewise, and you know, in trying to promote human rights in the Muslim world, that is different from simply promoting the Muslim side, because obviously we have a lot of issues of our own, right? Some of the governments don't have great human rights records. And so now when we have a conflict arise, there's a lot of feeling and there's different versions, as we have in the US, right? We have different versions of the current election. And so we seem to be losing our image. Can you still see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I guess it's my computer. So I wanted first to ask you, maybe let's have that a couple of images of the current conflict. maybe if you could just give us a sense of what the current situation is,
Right.
not
Absolutely.
the history so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Obviously, independent from the historical baggage, I do want to talk about, first of all, what this conflict is not about. Because I do hear a lot of questions from my American colleagues. They keep calling me, writing me, hey, you're from the region. This conflict just erupted. Is about, like, I primarily hear three different angles that from Americans, from Western, let's say, audience perspective, they see the region. Let me by highlighting that this is not about a proxy war.
So what would you like to add? What are we looking at now?
These are the things, these are pictures from Ganja, the Azerbaijan side. This is the second larger city of Azerbaijan, Ganja. And a couple of days ago, Ganja residents woke up to a ballistic missile from hit the city from Nagorno-Karabakh side, from an Armenian side as well. I'll just explain the differences between the two. In Nagorno-Karabakh and the surrounding regions, according to basic, international laws, these regions are Azerbaijan's territories. And what we see here, recently, Armenia is attacking from its territory, according to both international observers and also Azerbaijan government's records, that this missile attack is coming from Armenia to Azerbaijan. And Ganja is right next to Nagorno-Karabakh territory. And people of Ganja have nothing to do with the war. This city has nothing to do with the war itself and with the territorial issue that both countries have been having for a long time. Back to my point that this war is not about proxy war, just like you see in Syria and other countries, because there are sides here, as I mentioned, like countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia are involved. They both represent a very diverse region called South Caucasus. Region has been between, always like some empires. They have some interest in the region, but we always represented diversity. And the Armenians, living in Azerbaijan and used to live, and Azeris used to live in Armenia. Georgia is right next to, right in between. It's interesting that there will be an election, in Georgia in the coming days, and 12% of Georgian, voters will be Azerbaijani and Armenian origin, Georgians. My point is, they're all like very inside of each other's countries and living there for centuries. But the second point I want to make is that just to get this off the table, that this war is not about religion. It's not about Shiite Azerbaijan, Islamic country, got involved into a war with Christian Armenian, and then Iran, Shiite Iran is right there, and this is not about that either, because that's another question I keep getting from my American colleagues. There are several reasons why. First of all, Azerbaijan, although it's an Islamic country, we're all secular people. We just come off the Soviet Union, both Azerbaijan and Armenia were part of the Soviet Union. Our generation doesn't represent, as they call it, good Islam. And another thing is that Iran has not been backing Azerbaijan at this war. Recently we have heard several statements from Iran, but officially, Iranian government is not, part of this game. So they, just like some of the Western countries, their main point that we got no dog, at this war, in this fight. That's why. So I would just get this angle also off the table. So the third question that I keep hearing from my American colleagues, particularly journalist colleagues, is that whether or not this war has to do with this another Western-Russian confrontation. This democracy versus autocracy, Russia versus America, what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Georgia. Is that just another, Russia-US confrontation? And my answer is just right off the bat, that is no and no. First of all, because like I said, the US and the West, their attitude is that, hey, we got no dog in this fight. This is not our fight. You haven't seen, even in the middle of this fight, a barrel. You wouldn't see U.S. leaders, going to region and acting just like they do, in the other, hotspots. Russia, interestingly enough, this time is trying to, sit back and observe. They do have some role, some presence in Armenia, They have military base in Armenia, and as you know, this war has some background. Just briefly to create a picture that the war actually happened, for 6 years. It lasted between 1988 and 1994, and during that time, Russia was part of the war. And Azeris also believed that if there was no Russia, Armenia wouldn't have been able to win the war. I mean, just with basic, reasons that there are 3-4 times Azeris living in the region more than Armenians. So there are 2+ millions of Armenians and like 8 millions of Azeris. So militarily back then, both got Soviet Union got collapsed and they got involved in the war. So Russia was part of the war at that time, but right now it looks like Russia is just trying to sit back, and this is not about the West. And also, as you know, that what happened in Ukraine and Georgia, that was about European Union, how Western Europe were trying to see the Europe, and it was touching some sort of like Russia's backyard. But Azerbaijan and Armenia, none of them are part of European Union, and Armenia is actually part of Russia-backed military bloc. And Azerbaijan is neither part of NATO nor Russia-backed military bloc. So all these three angles I want to just take off the table. But what is this war about? So let's go back there. As I mentioned, Armenians and Azeris, they used to live together. Like I promised, I will not go back to history, but depending on how strongly, how far you spin that clock, people that in our part of the world are fighting about where the history starts. This land called Nagorno-Karabakh, at least like in last, let's say, century, was part of Azerbaijan. And according to history books I read, by the way, the Soviet Union, it was like, common book that everyone read, like Azeris and Armenians, were part of the same system. The territory is part of Azerbaijan, and also according to international standards, also international law, it is part of Azerbaijan. But Armenians living in that territory, Nagorno-Karabakh, they've always been in majority. And what happened when Soviet Union got collapsed, they decided that they would live with Azerbaijan. They want to, join Armenia, and then conflict erupted. And what is interesting in this case is that, as I mentioned, it was from Armenia's perspective, it's territorial dispute. Others don't see it that way; they think it's part of their territory. But interesting angle is missing in this case. You and I will have human rights, portfolio. That's why I want to apply there mostly. The human factor. Azeris and Armenians used to live together, and this region never represented, one ethnicity. Like I mentioned, like Armenians sometimes were in majority, Azeris, were there. But during last 27 or so, once Armenians took over Nagorno-Karabakh, they did engage in something that they are blaming Azerbaijan to, prepare to engage in the region, which is called ethnic cleansing. They took over the region, but they also kicked all the Azeris out of their land, and they became IDP.
In the 90s, how many Azeris were kicked out?
More than 400 million, over 400 million, 400,000 Azeris used to live in Nagorno-Karabakh, according to Azeri side. So there are some sources will say 350,000, but overall, like they all were kicked out of Nagorno-Karabakh itself. But not only that, when you pull back the map, you will see Nagorno-Karabakh and also surrounding territories. There are like 7 regions that have nothing to do with Nagorno-Karabakh itself. They are just between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh territory. Armenians took over those 7 regions as well, and also Azeris living there were like more than 600,000. They also were, kicked out of their land, and they all moved to inland. So they became IDPs, so internal displaced people.
Are they living in cities or in camps? What happened to the IDPs?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Your voice just said, yeah.
Are the IDPs living in cities, or are they confined to camps?
Right. So they are basically IDPs. Some of them moved to Baku, some of them moved to Ganja, Yevlak, and other parts of the country, like to inland. over 27 years, they were hoping, to be able to return back to Nagorno-Karabakh and also, surrounding territories. And Azeri government, as you know, that back then, UN and some other programs also were involved, along with those, international organizations. They worked on several projects to, build up some houses for them in, Baku and other, parts of the country. But for 27 years, they never had the chance to even visit their homes. So Armenians, kicked them out, and they, according to several international organizations' records, they did, engage in resettlement in the area. Some Armenians were moved from, not only from Yerevan, also from outside, like from other regions, like from, Syria, Libya, and other regions. I remember, when I was in Baku, it was like mid 2000s. Azerbaijani, government back then initiated and some fact-checking mission under, UN mandated OSCE, so that they went to a region back then. It was first time we heard back from an international, organization that confirmed that, back again, I'm talking about 2000s, there were like 75,000 Armenians moved in, throughout that time. And now, according to, again, different sources, there are like up to 100,000, between 100 to 200,000 Armenians, are in the region.
Well, here we have another wave of conflict which might create more displacement. It's very concerning. The article we just posted, I did want to just look at the text underneath the photo, if we can get the image back, because I wanted to ask you about that. It just talks about, because I wonder about coverage. There are complaints. I'm going to just peer here and see. It says hundreds killed, tens of thousands displaced, dozens of civilians dead on both sides. Armenia says more than 400 soldiers killed, most of whom were about 20 years old. Azerbaijan does not announce military death toll. Actual tolls believed to be higher. So that's sort of a bullet point summary from a few days ago in Al Jazeera. What would you say about that? Is it balanced? Is it accurate?
These are very interesting caveats that you mentioned. Those numbers, I mean, it pains me when we talk about numbers, hundreds, thousands, but we don't see human, real life, human cases behind that. Obviously, international media, I do represent, a journalistic, community. I don't really, share rhetoric, come from both sides about, international media, but the problem is the media doesn't have access, full access to a region because, as I mentioned, because of the very nature of this conflict. Azerbaijan feels that it, Nagorno-Karabakh it's because it's territory. Allowing these international, reporters, going to Nagorno-Karabakh through Armenia without informing Azerbaijani side, that automatically, makes them end up, in Azerbaijan's blacklist. So it's like basically they can't go to Azerbaijan after that. Coming from Azerbaijan, I do understand, that they feel like, hey, just all we're asking you just to send us an email and inform us that I'm going to Nagorno-Karabakh. By doing that, you will express your respect to my territorial integrity. That's Azerbaijan government's viewpoint. Nagorno-Karabakh itself, I forgot to mention that even Armenia doesn't recognize Nagorno-Karabakh. So basically, according to international law, it is, a separated territory, breakaway territory under any international organization's control. So that means if you go there, you're just on your own. There is no international law that could apply. And just, there's no Nagorno-Karabakh passport or visa system. You have to go to Armenia and they pass there through Armenia, by the way, crossing Azerbaijan's, 7 territories, that land that, will connect Nagorno-Karabakh with. So basically you are violating Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, but there is no international, law, accountability, all this stuff that you're just on your own. Some reporters take that, risk and they go there from Armenian side. And another problem involved is that Azerbaijan's relationship with international organizations and media, independent media. As you mentioned at the very beginning, that I have press freedom portfolio that I very much care about that, and the fact that the government doesn't allow international reporters or doesn't have good relationship with international media is another problem. But overall, my concern is I also want to use this chance to address my colleagues that my concern is about the angle that they're trying to add. As I mentioned, this, whether it's about religious, angle here, or there's a proxy war, or all this stuff. So I would highly recommend my colleagues as well to, again, dive into the detail, try to reach out to sources. Azerbaijan has some internet connection issues these days because of the war, but overall they can reach out to Azeris. They are all over the place, and confirm their, at least engage in fact checking. Yes, Azer government doesn't announce those numbers, which is true, and which is not something I subscribe to. I don't. I'm all for openness. I think it's important to know the numbers. But the fact is that this war just started, just broke up. They feel that they need to keep the morality of people fight, and Azeris see this issue differently than average Armenians, and I can put that into context by the fact that there's a loser, there's a winner in this war. A winner obviously wants to move on and promote peace because they won the land and they have the land, and they just they just want to move forward, and because the status quo benefits Armenia significantly in this case. 27 years passed. You have people living. Yeah, I'm sorry if I think I cut you off.
No, not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
So I want about media and about different points of view. Certainly there are different versions of this. It doesn't mean they're all correct. But looking at this cartoon, what would you say? Who's the puppet master in this version?
That is a very question. I have seen several cartoons like this. I appreciate you. For that. I don't know where the sources where this is coming from, but puppet master. When people ask me, why did this war start now? And mostly I see the puppet master Putin is sitting and he has two legs, and and one leg is Armenia, one leg is Azerbaijan, and they're fighting against each other. But then you see the third actor in the region, third player in the region, let's say Turkey. There have been several cartoons, roaming around. But my point is there are 4 P's that I would highlight here that would cause this war right now. One P would be Putin, of course. We can talk about that a little bit because Putin has regional ambitions. This whole divide and control diplomacy has been in the region for decades, and I do see that role. Putin does have his fingers there. Second P will be Pashinyan, Armenia's president. I'm sorry, a prime minister, but actual leader, because Armenia is right now, prime minister and actual, who is in charge, right now in the country. He's one of our colleagues, former colleagues, a journalist, represents, democratic, values. At least that's how we saw him. And when he took over, it was promising for the region, particularly the region that, so much suffering from post-Sovietism for more than 2 decades now. Something that Russia doesn't want to let them go, and then all by a sudden you have someone coming from he's a Western educated person and speaks English very well, and it has he at least he managed to overthrow Putin-backed, Russia-backed leaders in Armenia that have been by the way they are from Karabakh, former leaders of Armenia, originally were from Karabakh. He was able to basically bring some democracy to the region, and which raised hopes among Azeris as well a couple of years ago. But what happened over the years ago, 2 years or so, first of all, Russia didn't stop him. That was surprising because Russia did stop many others. But they didn't stop him immediately. Short term and long term, they played very interesting cards. That Russia-backed, establishment in Armenia tried to challenge him. So Pashinyan actually failed in terms of consolidating the power. So he tried to use all the heavy cards, but then the one card that he used last year, I think he overplayed his card. It was Karabakh card to convince Russian-backed folks that I am one of you. So there's nothing that will allow me to basically step back in this conflict, all the stuff. But what he did, he went even further than even his predecessor didn't go that far. Was about announcing Karabakh Armenia as part of Armenia. That statement, was surprising. Many people in the region, in particular Azeris, also were shocked because it was part of the negotiation process. For 27 years, as I mentioned, that Azeri, refugees, IDPs, they have been waiting, for this, one day that it will arrive and they will return back to it. And then all by sudden, you have democratically elected president coming out and going that far. That triggered, I think, that unleashed, even in Azerbaijan, many, particularly, my colleagues, we worked so hard to, to rehumanize each other. It's post-war society, and Armenians and Azeris, at first obviously hated each other. Armenians were winners, Azeris were losers, and it took 2 decades, for them to rehumanize each other. It was, obviously there were some problems. Regime Putin was still there. He was trying to use the conflict. Each time region was trying to step into towards democracy. Karabakh was one of the cards, that Russia was using. So the second P was Pashinyan, and first P was Putin, and the third P, in my understanding, is the pandemic. The pandemic does have, I think, enough role in this case because both countries are suffering from, the pandemic itself. Region right now is not in good shape economically, and this is something new. They don't know what to do. What's the next step? Even if vaccine arrives, in our part, here in the U.S., it will take a year or two for the South Caucasus to survive. And also, there's in Azerbaijan, all this oil income declined. It did raise the tension in the region. And the fourth P, I would say, that's a little bit longer P. That is the presidential election in the United States. Some of my colleagues in Washington translated as disengagement. That the U.S. is too busy, and there's a mediators group, by the way, UN-backed, UN mandated OSCE mediation group, co-chaired by 3 countries. Significant country is the U.S., obviously, the leading country, and France, and also Russia. So you have on one hand Russia, troublemaker, acting as a peacemaker. You have France, basically, Europe has its own problems right now. Macron is trying to, consolidate power in Europe, within the Europe. That's a different story. So U.S. got disengaged, and these are the factors that did affect significantly. I believe that it's not coincidence it happened right now. But coming to your question, Puppet Master, we have some new actors that are trying to weigh in that had not been part of this process traditionally. One is Turkey. Turkey, for many years, even like when war started in the 1990s, Turkey played a very interesting role. We have former President Elçibek's statement. In 1992, there was a video footage circulating on the internet saying that Elçibek was complaining that I called Turkish leaders, asked for a helicopter, and they didn't send me that. So Turkey tried not to get involved, militarily, back then at least. But now Turkey is trying to basically, at least have a seat, behind the table. There are several reports, media reports, that I personally don't have, enough, evidence to back them up. But where I can say that Turkey's involvement, at least, moral support to Azerbaijan is apparent. So this is not something we can deny.
Another P that you had mentioned earlier was proxy. And certainly there seems to be a great game going on here with the different, whether it's Russia or Turkey. And disengagement, as you said, by the United States as part of that group of 3 overseeing peace process. I understand, but correct me if I'm wrong, that there were 7 different peace agreement processes going on, and each one kind of fell apart at the end. So this has been allowed to, well, to remain as an irritant, and there's sort of almost a political economy of conflict that must benefit some. I don't know how this relates to oil, kind of P word, but when people think about what's behind this and why now, of course the default is, oh, it must be economic. It must be about pipelines. Is there any truth to that?
If you don't mind, I would add some more. Particularly, you mentioned the negotiation part, how heavy, heavily it hits in this case. I think I would add one more P in this case: the people. That was missing in the entire picture. Adam, I've been following this conflict from day one, and there's this negotiation process, and like I mentioned, the international superpowers are involved. But this whole process was missing an empathy, simple sympathy. I mean, 27, 30 years. Look at Europe. Germany apologized. What it did. During the Second World War, it took about a couple of decades. My point is, I woke up the other day, and I woke up to the news. It was very tragic news. One of my high school classmates passed away, and he went to Fizuli. Is like right now that's where the battles are happening. So he went there, and he was killed, and he died. And I woke up to that news. I was asking myself, for many years, I was, among several number of, I won't say there are many of us, Azeris that were promoting peace, talking about, peaceful, future between Azeris and Armenians. Was there any single thing that I could have done to prevent this from happening, to prevent him from going to, that fight, to that battle? And then I started thinking, well, that guy actually was originally from Fizuli. When he was kicked out of that land, he was a toddler, and his father was holding him. And there are some pictures I saw, like he showed me over and over at school, that they killed his father while he was holding him. They shot him on back, and his father just he left him behind, and his mother was screaming, and they just ran away. They came to Baku, and for 27 years, he had no chance, not a single time, to go back and see his land, let alone seeing his father, what happened at his house, for 27 years. And then one day he woke up, and it was 27th of September, and he heard that, some fight, occurred, and Azeri government probably is trying to, basically, I don't want to call it drafting, but there was some sort of like drafting process in Azerbaijan. So he went voluntarily. He joined the army, and he turned back there. And I asked him back then, why did you do that? And he said, this is the only chance for me to go back, see Fizuli. So he went there to see, his land. For 27 years, this negotiation process missed the human factor. No one apologized them for what had done, and as I mentioned, Nagorno-Karabakh itself became a mono-ethnic island, but it's island in a diverse region. I mean, entire region represents diversity. Nagorno-Karabakh, what makes Karabakh Karabakh? Look at the Nagorno vocabulary is actually in Russian, Karabakh in Turkish Azeri. So what makes Nagorno-Karabakh is actually it represents this multi-ethnic reality. For 27 years, they were displaced and they never had a chance to return back. And then this negotiation process, whole process, backed by Russia, US, and France, it was all about several we call them core tourists. They're not core chairmen, visiting the region and just launching here, talking to the leaders, and leaders had this rule that nobody else but us. No one has a right to talk to Armenian. You can't really, if you have personal relationship with an Armenian, you are an enemy of the nation. And this, 27 years is too long for that. And that generation, they were completely, sidelined from the process. And we never had the people-to-people efforts, the track two, known as the track two effort. There's several Azeri, writers, wrote about Azeri-Armenian, potential relationship. One of the writers I covered extensively had a book, and when he wrote that book about, it was a fictional book, but it was about, Azerbaijan-Armenian historic, relationship. And, Azeris started questioning him because, as I said, they are the losing side and they lost the land. And then the question is, how dare you? You would just talk about peace after all this stuff. They don't even let us return back and visit our land. So that whatever solution that they were cooking up, whatever drug they were cooking up, did not include people. And that's what we're facing right now. That okay, well, let's say the best case scenario from Azerbaijani perspective, they're gonna get the land, and so what's next? Then 30 years they will live in the region, and then Armenians will, get stronger, and they will hit back. This is not how you resolve the problem. So I feel that as long as our leaders need to sit back and think about the human factor, people.
It sounds like we're getting two more P words: politics instead of peace, right? And it's a very, yeah. Now, just for a moment, we're going to break. We have a break in this show. So please be back in just a second. This is Adam Carroll with UN This Week. Okay. And we're back. Adam Carroll with UN This Week with our guest today, Alex Raufoglu, longtime journalist from Azerbaijan and affiliated with the Turan Agency, which is, tell me something about your agency. It's the last independent news agency. What does that mean?
It's a very good question, Adam. I appreciate that question because it's not only the last independent news agency of Azerbaijan, it's also first independent news agency of former Soviet Union. So when Soviet Union got collapsed, a group of journalists, they understood Russian disinformation, how it was damaging our region, particularly in Azerbaijan. So they got together to be able to, at least provide the truth from our part of the world. So they established this news agency even before Azerbaijan became independent. And news agency has been around for 30 years. Just recently we just had anniversary of 30 years anniversary. And it's based in Baku. We have reporters all over the regions, and we also actually the only news agency from Azerbaijan that had a contract with Armenian news agencies. Basically, we're cooperating with our regional colleagues, Azerbaijan's Turan and Armenia's Army4, were exchanging news. In Georgia, obviously, we're present, so we post our articles in 3 languages. I write obviously from the US in English, and it's been translated into Russian, in Azeri. It is a small region, but it was full of problems. One of them is obviously having access to information. Like I mentioned, it's a post-Soviet. Post-Sovietism has never left us. And Azerbaijan particularly recently, has significant, particularly human rights and press freedom concerns, and the fact that we are the last independent news agency in the country is quite telling.
Well, it's really important work you're doing, helping to keep democracy alive, basically, because that relies on free and fair information that can be hollowed out. But so this link we have on the screen brings up this issue I've heard about in the last couple of weeks about foreign fighters coming in, perhaps brought by Russia from Syria, that kind of thing. Do you think there's any truth to it?
I really appreciate that question, Adam. Before diving into what exactly is happening, it's obviously there is no way for us to 100% cover this conflict because, as I mentioned, the conflict is happening. Journalists are not present. Obviously, there's so much that we don't know. But you know, this the problem is, as I mentioned, like I lost my friend, and there's so many family members, so many friends. It was every single day from both sides. You have just numbers from Armenia. Azeri government doesn't, post its numbers, but there are, human, real life, humans, people that are dying every single day. My question was from day one that, I mean, they apply like some basic logic in this case. Why would Azeris or anyone else in the region want to involve, mercenaries abroad? First of all, as I said, Azerbaijan has like, quite an amount of, military, soldiers, and they got rich recently. I mean, they got a lot of, weapons, um, and they feel that, are there foreign fighters in our land? The question is yes, and the answer is Armenian soldiers are fighting in our land. So they are, the only foreign fighters. So why should we involve other foreign fighters to fight the foreign fighters? We need to get rid of foreign fighters in our land. That's their logic. That's their point. And another question is, we share, similar history. We live in the same region, and we know what happens when we know what happens when you have uncontrolled people, like in an uncontrolled territory, like Nagorno-Karabakh, has been like, as you know, they break their territory. Even Armenia doesn't recognize them. And the point is, I'm sorry, I think I just a little bit need to switch my city if you don't mind. So the point is, yeah, yeah. The point is, I mean, if they come to region and we can't really control them, and no one can, basically, like guarantee anything about them, what's going to happen after a war. There's so many, the literal of, unanswered questions that, that from Azerbaijan's perspective, don't make sense. And another angle, another point is that, I mean, I keep asking my colleagues, please show me any single dead, fighter. Why are we getting, every single day, real life news, that our friends are dying. I mean, if there's a war, if there are, both sides fighting, they got to be someone, killed from both sides, right? And then we had the ceasefire, humanitarian ceasefires announced, a couple of days ago. That means they were supposed to, swamp, dead bodies. I mean, at least Armenians should have had already by now some dead Syrian, soldier. I mean, there is no fact that I could apply it to. I mean, the only thing I have seen in the national media is that someone, made a phone call from Nagorno-Karabakh and said, I am a Syrian fighter, which doesn't make sense to me, because first of all, if they're fighting in an Azerbaijani side, I can't call my parents in Baku. How do they call them, the guardian from Nagorno-Karabakh? There is no connection in Azerbaijan. There's no internet connection. I mean, if Azerbaijan paid them, God knows how much they say, like according to media reports, like $2,000 to fight, do you think they would go there, do a phone call? That just none of this makes sense to me. But I don't want to honestly, turn down every single, stone. I just want to, on the contrary, to take a look under every single stone. I don't want to leave any stone, aside. But without seeing fact, I just can't really, back up to those claims. I'll believe it when I see it. And
well, exactly. And instead, I'm getting an echo. Anyway, thank you. The propaganda is one thing, but news reporting is another, and hopefully the second will, eventually succeed in throwing light on the actual situation. But meanwhile, whatever the exact situation may be, what would you like to see the international community, especially the United Nations, do at this time?
First of all, obviously, as I mentioned before, the fact that we're trying to frame it differently, a proxy war or foreign fighters coming and engaging in, some sort of, Shiite, Christian, war, all this stuff. I would ask my colleagues, everyone, please, 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 try to do some research, understand the region. Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is a unique conflict. It is, again, from Armenians' perspective, it is a territorial conflict. From Azerbaijan's perspective, it is not. And try to at least, be present in the region. If you can't, I totally understand. But you're not helping when you add up some different angles and trying to involve, foreign actors, at least justify, or create some, base for foreign involvement. The reason why I perhaps I overreacted, but I don't want to, subscribe to this notion that, some fighters, foreign fighters, are fighting in the region. Is that because I see the broader picture? I see several, few other steps, forward. When I look at, main, let's say, goal behind these claims, I understand where these are coming from, because first official source to those claims was Russian Foreign Affairs Ministry. Please try not to let Russian disinformation, drive this conflict. There is we have enough troubles, particularly, in that part of the world. But Azeris and Armenians, like I said, used to live together, and what happened in 1990s. Again, as I said, Armenians. If you ask my Armenian colleagues, they will take you back to, the ancient history. Yeah, this land, belongs to both of us, both regions. Armenians, Azeris, Georgians, they are South Caucasians. We can't, move out of the region, and we can't kick Armenians out of the region. We have to live together at the very end of the day. At the end of the day, the point is, please try to see the problem the way it is. It's more than enough. It is, it is something that just needs to, reflect human factor that is being overseen. If I lose my friends, family members every single day, and foreign media, instead of covering, at least, the grave, this let's say, both from both sides, from in Armenia as well and Azerbaijan as well, that the pain that we have, is still focusing on that. They try to ask who else is killing them. Since when it's okay for Armenians and Azerbaijan and Azeris, to kill each other, as if they are, they have been green lighted. If they kill each other, it's fine. We shouldn't talk about that. But what we need to look for is, like, if there's anyone else is involved, if Syrian is killing them. What I mean? There's a human factor. That people dying every single day. The Syrians are dying.
I'm very glad, though, that to hear the ceasefire, which is a ray of hope. And we don't have much time. We've got about a minute and a half, actually. So just to add anything, any other sign of hope, and also, how would these ceasefires actually be enforced and implemented? Is it up to civil society? Is it up to? It is up to the people themselves to some extent. So, how can we make peace a reality in the region?
From Azerbaijan's perspective, if you ask them, if tell them stop, they will say, "Okay, I'll stop." Then what's next? So will Armenia stop? Will I be able to return back to my land? It looks like just asking them to stop is not enough. That is my observation. Looking at Armenia, obviously, as I mentioned, they're the winners. They have the land. Of course, they look like and act like peacemakers, because time is on their side. As I said, like 28 to 27 years, passed, and they moved on. But there are others out there. There, IDPs out there. They were not able to move on. So you need to offer something more than just a ceasefire. I have read statements coming from Baku. They say, "Hey, we need to have some timeline, some plan. At least we need to see some light at the end of this tunnel, because we can't just wait for another 30 years and go back fighting again. So we need to have something tangible, something more than just calls for ceasefire." We need to use all the tools. I despise the word. I despise our leaders that brought us here. I mean, 30 years. They didn't, use all the possible channels. They were not creative enough in terms of diplomacy. Peacemakers failed us. We all got failed. We all failed. Those who were looking up to us. That international community, failed. We need to just go out and acknowledge it, and bring them together in terms of, for the best. I mean, we need to make sure that there is some light in this tunnel. They do, see, they do feel themselves, at least moving forward as part of this region. No one is going to, kick another, side out of the region. This region belongs to us. South Caucasus belongs to South Caucasians. So there gotta be some solution. There are all the other. There are many, regions, say hotspots in the world. Like look at Palestine and Israel. That there is some solution, but no one wants to pick it, right? No one wants to take it. There are some solutions. We need to have, enough courage from both sides, and also the international community. When they went in, they gotta offer something more than just calls for ceasefire.
Exactly. Well, very sorry for your loss. I hope somehow more loss can be prevented, and we've got to do better. The international community has got to do better. And so this is hopefully, inshallah, going to be helpful for all sides. So thank you very much, Alex, for being on the show. And I hope that the viewers will stay tuned for our show on Thursday about Central African Republic, in part in comparison to the Rohingya crisis, another situation of mass displacement. And so we are UN this week, and we'll be back again. So again, thanks, Alex. Take care, everybody.